a warrior captain in fact, who clings fiercely to the fighting art of his forebears. His name is Mbomvu, praise name the Red One. He's also a tribal headman as it happens. His men are reputedly some of the best stick fighters still left in Zululand, and before we could see them in action, we had to go to the Red One and get his permission. As a fighting art form, stick fighting is still developing. We therefore decided to bring it under the scrutiny of some fighting art specialists. Liam Keeley, well versed in the Eastern martial arts, has learned a measure of Zulu stick fighting from migrants in Johannesburg.
Liam Keeley,
The Red One was delighted to hear that we could play the sticks. He said in idiomatic Zulu that it washed his heart clean to see people from the Western culture interested in his own. And then he expressed a desire to pit a few bulls, as he put it, so that he could see how much this Liam had learned from that migrant in Johannesburg. These two men are playing sticks, or ugudalindu. Even in play, every blow which slips through one's defense is potentially dangerous, especially if it comes at a crucial moment. The smaller man is Sugumisa's Kakai. He's a very, very able young fighter. He's so quick that he's even able to hit the stick out of his opponent's hand as the opponent tries to strike. He's a very popular fighter in his own area because of the fact that he's able to use skill and finesse against a much bigger fighter's brute force. Liam spent 5.5 years in Japan studying the martial arts. As a hoplologist, that's a person who studies fighting systems, he'd become fascinated with Zulu stick fighting. Today he can handle himself pretty well, but he's hardly a match for Sugumisa, who's able to place blows on his thigh, almost at will. Now we'll take our fighters to the city to meet other fighting arts specialists who are not able to come all the way out to Zululand. We'll start off our comparison with some traditional European fighting arts.
The two examples we have chosen are fencing, being the most refined, and stave fighting here, possibly being the most applicable. Now we asked Professor Ken Pearson if he could draw any analogies to stick fighting.
Having watched the Zulu stick fighting, I was quite impressed with how closely the two sports or two activities are related. And the two areas that stand out most are, Sue, maybe if you can just hold the sword up, is where the Zulu deflects the opponent's weapon before he actually makes the attack. It's the platform on which to launch the attack. So we would call that a beat attack. So all I have to do is beat it and make my attack. That's one. The other one is the pretense to hit an area and then go for somewhere else. Selling a dummy, making a feint, etc. Now saber fencing, I pretend to hit the chest, the blade goes across, I come under and round the other side. That's called a compound attack. That's a 1-2, right, or chest flank. And this is very quick and can take the two parries. You go chest, flank, 1, 2, 3.
Come back in again.
End of story. Combine that with the deflection on the blade, parry can, and again, once more. There I'm using the beat and the compound attack together.
Ken, one of the reasons that Zulus still become highly specialized and skilled in Zulu stick fighting that a Zulu man never knows when he might not be involved in a duel situation. This might arise out of the fact that he's been aggrieved, and then he's got to challenge the man to get satisfaction, or else one of his younger brothers has been aggrieved, and the younger brother is not in a position to fight because he's either too weak or inexperienced, and then he'll do what's called utengi party, or actually take over his younger brother's fight in the duel situation. Do you have any period of English history where perhaps this could correlate?
Well, that used to happen in Europe too, many, many years ago, but it was much more chivalrous to fight your own battles, and so had you insulted me, then for some form of social redress, I would take my glove off, and in front of a witness, I would issue the challenge, down gauntlet, hence the expression, throwing down the gauntlet, and my second would then make the arrangements, and then we would fight a duel. And usually the first one to get wounded, draw blood, honour was satisfied, and the whole thing was finished.
Right. These two men, for example, I'll show you the leader. They've got a very strict format on how they actually challenge as well. They say, 9 wounds, here's the bull. And that's the introduction to the fight. And with them as well, normally first blood means satisfaction. Every boy. How's they boy? Every boy. They boy. Watch it. That's it.
By slowing the film down, you may yourselves be able to see some of the tactics that Professor Ken Pearson related to stick fighting. Deflection, parry, feign, the compound attack, and the beat attack. One realizes that even in a furious exchange of blows, the movement is fluid, contracted, and stylized. It almost amounts to a dance form when two good fighters clash. Sugumitsa, like all good fighters, uses his own inborn sense of style and finesse, and he interprets a fight in a way which is totally unique to himself.
Once the tribal platoon captain, or in Indonesian Sensei, actually separates two fighters, that's the end of the fight. To carry on fighting after that is to break the law. Another important point is the fact that this is important in terms of our migrant labor dynamics. Because a man might be working in the city, for example, and someone grieves him out at home, and then someone at home can actually fight on his behalf without him losing his job in the city to go back and settle the matter. Now, to sum up, in other words, as far as Zulu stick fighting is concerned, there are two very important facts. The first is that you can use it as a self-defense mechanism, and secondly, you use it in the duel. Now, as a Taekwondo expert, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Well, in the Taekwondo context, I've really got nothing to say because Taekwondo is an art that doesn't use weapons. But certainly in medieval England, the peasantry were not allowed to carry weapons unless they were sort of officially levied by a landowner to form part of an army. And so they'd use farming implements, or the most common thing, and nearest to Zulu stick fighting, they would just go to a hedge and cut one of these. They're readily available and they cost nothing.
Right.
And they, of course, they don't look like a weapon.
Yeah.
However, it weighs about 4 kilograms. They can bring down a horseman with this. And of course, through usage, the skill improved. You have very similar defense, counter-offense, feinting, changing, the effective length of the weapon. And as they got better and better with them, they not only used them for defense, but tests of skill. You'd have tests of skill in village fetes, or on any opportunity where two individuals might meet, and, they would chance their arm at a test of skill.
Even people who didn't know each other, for example, just walking down the road, can you imagine something like that happening?
Oh, certainly. I don't think the intention was to actually injure the opposition, but the example that readily springs to mind is sort of Robin Hood and Little John in the Sherwood Forest, where they both meet at a bridge.
That's right.
They're neither going to give way, and you have this test of skill with a quarterstaff, and of course Robin Hood lost. Maybe your lesson in all sorts of things starts right now, young sir. How's up the widow, man? There's an interesting point creeps up here, Barry. It's to do with chivalry. At the time, Robin Hood, being of noble birth, was carrying a broadsword, probably a bow and arrow as well, but he chose to put the bow, his his arrows down, took off the sword, and chose to fight Little John with a staff.
On his own
fact,
terms.
when they initially met, Robin Hood didn't even have a staff. Little John waited around while he went and cut one. You know? So
Talking of the etiquette and fair play involved, Ken, actually brings to mind possibly the most popular application of Zulu stick fighting, and that's in what they call ukubanga ubunsizwa, to vie for manliness. It's a natural contest of skill at arms.
Yes.
For example, two men might just be walking along with their dress shields at their side going to some kind of an occasion, and they might see a whole group of maybe 10 or 15 on the other side of a river. One of these men will run forward, stand in a strategic position at the river crossing and say to other men, look, none of you will dislodge me from here. If we fight fairly, just using sticks, I guarantee you not one of you will get across without walking through the river. And he'll hold that point. And if he's a good stick fighter, he'll hold them all off.
Sugumisa is forever on the lookout for a prank. Here he incites his older relative to challenge approaching men by saying, who do they think they are approaching so arrogantly? My uncle, you are more than a match for all of them. Give them a go. On one level, that was a fun contest, but on a deeper level, challenge is established in esprit de corps, especially when the fighting heats up. This was one of the great hallmarks of Shaka Zulu's impis, the fact that men just would not break, and he was able, therefore, to trust them in any situation.
So we've established three things about Zulu stick fighting. Firstly, that it's a method of self-defense. Secondly, that it's a method of natural redress. And lastly, as a contest sport. Now, very often when one thinks about martial art, you think about the Eastern self-defense forms. It was in the study of these that we were able to draw our closest analogies to Zulu stick fighting. This happened when Edward Jardine invited us to give a demonstration to his weapons class in the gymnasium. Let me introduce you, Eddie. This is Sugumisa, this is Judith, and
Sugumisa, until now a bit dubious about coming to Johannesburg to be filmed, perked up considerably when he saw his old friend Liam Keeley. Even Tetu, a renowned warrior captain, said it was a fine show that we had a friend among the karate people. It was obvious they were suspicious of what tricks these strange fighters might try and pull on them.
What I'd like to talk to your class about first, Eddie, is the fair fight. The Zulus call it uderte, because of the fact that it's a specific fight between two fighters who've either got an issue to settle or else simply want to prove supremacy. Now, there's an incredible etiquette tied up in this kind of a fight. There are very definite do's and don'ts. For example, as the fighters square up, it would be considered very, very bad form to simply rush into a flurry of attack with vicious blows. The fighters normally square up and then they just probe each other for a while and give each other a chance to warm up to the situation. And after that, the fight can escalate. If a fighter demonstrates bad form, for example, one of the two fighters might drop a stick. Now he's quite entitled to rush in and attack the fighter while his stick's down, but that shows that he hasn't got confidence in his own fighting ability. A chivalrous fighter will stand back, let the man come on his equal term again, and resume the fight. This would actually bring some cheers from the crowd because of the fact that he's demonstrated good form. We're just going to close quickly and show you the basic attack and counter-attack kind of movements. Come on. I've seen the introduction to the fight, and a fight like that might well escalate like this.
Now when a fight's underway, it's so fast and furious that the camera and even the layman will miss the blows that strike home. Next shot. Gets me on the elbow as I pull out. Inside my defense. I get him on, he blocks my thigh. Change of blows. Headshot on on Tetu. He gets my back. Inside parry. I find my mark on his neck. Closing in. I get his head. Round shot to get my back. None of the blows that have come home yet have actually been direct shots. All of them have been broken in one way or another by the defense, and so they're not very serious at all. Notice how the fighters lead with their left legs. It's almost balletic in a way. Footwork is very, very important to any fight. Notice Tetu's stance. Contracted, almost like a panther. He gets my head.
Now Tetu here has advanced a very interesting theory as to why stick fighting is still a very viable form of self-defense in the rural areas as well as in the city. And very briefly, it's because of the fact that in this country, due to legislation, blacks are not allowed to carry guns. So there's no instant form of self-defense that you can just go into a shop and buy a gun and put it in your pocket. Every Zulu must know that someone at a time is going to have to account for himself in physical terms with physical weapons, and these are the ones that he knows best. I think you'd be very, very surprised to find that many Zulus living in a place like Johannesburg, although they might wear a collar and tie and speak pretty good English, if they find themselves confronted by gangsters, given a pair of sticks, they'd account for themselves pretty well. Most of you have seen a migrant labourer strolling down the street carrying an umbrella, for example. This umbrella looks pretty innocuous, but when you take a closer look, it's got a spike on the one end and a heavy handle on the other. It's a perfect self-defense weapon if you know how to use it. Also, you've probably seen the migrant labourer walking down with an ornate walking stick, which is perfectly feasible in terms of the laws of the country. However, if attacked, this combination is a perfect self-defense against assailants, like this, for example. And he'll account for himself pretty well.
That's very interesting because just as the Zulu took the walking stick and the umbrella and started using them in a different way, in other words as a weapon, the exact same thing happened in Okinawa, where you'd find that the farmers would use tools. So a peasant farmer would perhaps use a sickle, he'd use a staff and so on. Right. Eddie here is actually a teacher of Okinawan weapons.
Can you demonstrate this, Eddie?
And you'll be able to show some of the weapons that were used by the peasants and by the... This here is called a nunchaku. This is the actual one, the nunchaku, this is the training one. Yeah, the nunchaku has been very wrongly presented in movies and books and this type of thing. So a lot of people think the nunchaku is there for swinging around, up and over, etc., changing hands and all funny tricks. But by doing these kind of things, you actually lose the feeling of surprise in the other person. He knows that you're swinging this around and it's going to come with the right hand. For example, if someone attacks you, you had the nunchaku behind you, and as you're moving, right, and it's a person. Okay, you wouldn't sort of stand around and take all funny tricks and do all weird things with the nunchaku. The other weapon is the oar. This is called an eku in Japanese. Because it was a fishing weapon, you use it in an area where there's a lot of sand. But certain moves, as you can see, like scooping sand in different shapes and using it afterwards. Or you find you can use it as a attacking move on the sharp side.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Here's another example of the other Okinawan type peasant weapon. This is called a kama. And I'd like to ask you the message of the demonstration for you.
That would be really nice.
This is another kind of weapon used in the farming kind of area. As you can see, this is a tool. It's used for cutting grass. In Japanese, it's called a kama. Let me show you some moves that you can use with a kama as against staff. I see. For example, if someone strikes down with a staff that way, you use a kama to kick in and attack down.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
And for a lunge, you would move afterwards, carry and...
What he's in fact saying, Eddie, is simply that once an opponent brings out melee weapons, you're talking about a situation of total warfare. I see. Let me just show you a little bit about these methods. This is the battle axe, and it'll cut straight through the shield, for example. It's totally illegal to use it. As you can see, it's got a little nut here, so you can actually screw it off, and take it out and keep it in your pocket. And the moment you're attacked by assailants, it's simply a question of threading it back on and tightening your bolt, and you've got an incredibly lethal weapon. This weapon here is called Uchumoechu, and it's kept disguised in this fashion until you find yourself attacked, and then you can slip off the top like this and use it to keep your opponents at bay in this fashion. Attack and defend at the same time while you're striking with your right hand. Now what Ted is also saying is that one must not be misled into thinking that these are everyday weapons in Zululand. You only use these weapons if your life is in danger. In other words, if you're attacked by people and you know that they're actually wanting to kill you, then you bring out these weapons. Otherwise, the fair fight or Udetu principle holds sway. For the norm in Zululand is that when platoons are going to meet and fight, they fight more or less on the fair fight principle, where people don't really get killed and casualties are usually very low. In fact, quite often when two platoons have fought by battle of arrangement, which is called Ibiamana, they actually arrange to fight on a certain hilltop at a certain time. After the battle, opponents will go away together and wash each other's wounds to show that they've got no long-lasting enmity about it. This, in fact, has got it's a theme which has got a historical precedent at the Battle of Broadstreet, when the Zulus, failing to dislodge the British, rallied for one last time, and instead of attacking, actually paid tribute to their adversaries because of their valiant resistance, and then they withdrew.
Now while we were in Zululand, we met two platoon captains who exemplify the difference between the blood feud on one hand and the fair fight on the other. The captain you're now watching exemplifies the blood feud. You've already met him, Mbomvu, the red one. He and his people fled from the war-torn area of Msinga, territory of blood feuds. Feuds develop to blood, which under warlords become wars of attrition. Hit squads operate from Johannesburg to wreak havoc and disappear back into the city without trace. 3 of the Red One's unarmed warriors were shot while courting their girlfriends at a river. At the funeral, using guns and spears, the assassins again sprang an ambush. Homes burned through the night and cattle were driven off. Taking what little they could, the Red and his followers left for this, their new home. The other captain is Vice Biela. He typifies the fair fight mentality. At Mawanda, he engaged 400 of his men in a fair fight. In the clash, men fell, some broke bones, others ran away, but there were no dead, and come sunset, his men had won the fight. His horse, bugle and jacket are British military influences, which now have an intrinsic Zulu flavor.
Barry, I see the shields the men are carrying here are much smaller than the ones we've got in the gym. Now why is this?
In Shaka's time, this would have been simply a ceremonial shield for a wedding. It wouldn't have been a war shield. However, the way that art has developed today, this is actually a war shield. This is what you carry in total war. In Shaka's time, one of his major stratagems was the fact that he unified Zululand by, instead of conscripting according to territories, he actually conscripted according to age groups, and thereby unified everyone and got away with disloyalties. This shield here, for example, is almost a pure black shield. and that would have been for the new conscripts. As they progressed, they'd be issued with a shield which had more white in it, until ultimately the veterans in his army had a pure white shield. These men would have been approximately 38 to 45 years old.
So they'd be slowing down by then. Okay.
Well, you could say they were slowing down in terms of speed and stuff like that, but in fact, they were the cream of the army because of the fact that they'd seen so much action that their skill was that much higher, and in fact, the generals would use them in the most strategic positions because they knew that they could depend upon them. This, in fact, reinforces my argument that Zulu skill at arms is, in fact, a martial art, and not simply pure brute force. Now, if one's talking about Shaka and his strategies, you've got to consider the fact that Shaka was the first general in southern Africa to actually introduce formation fighting. For example, I'll show you what we mean. Using a big shield such as this, he shortened the throwing spear into a short, broad stabbing spear like this. Misa! And by covering both your flanks and using hand-to-hand combat, he accomplished really incredible feats on the battlefield.
Barry, looking at the shield wall here, it really reminds me of the idea of the Roman legions. I think it was a very similar idea. Peter, could you give me a hand? You had a large shield, a short stabbing weapon, in this case a sword, and again the idea of fighting in formation. Okay, ready?
There's still a strong military flavor to Zulu weddings, a legacy of the empire. Let me take you to a Zulu wedding where you'll see stick fighting in its natural context. People travel up to 30 kilometers over country like this to attend a wedding because of the fact that it's one of the most important on the Zulu social calendar. We were invited by a very old man, my personal stick fighting tutor. His name is Prince Gilenja Biela, and like all royalty in Zululand, he commands tremendous respect. His grandfather, Mkhosana, was a general at the Battle of Asandwana against the British. History books don't really take cognizance of his name, but Mkhosana is incredibly important still today in Zululand, and young girls use his name to swear an oath. As our party passes a settlement, a small platoon joins in behind us. They're fully dressed for the wedding. The sticks and shields, a living legacy of the warrior traditions. You may be surprised to see warriors going fully armed to a wedding, but this is because of the martial overlay of their legacy from the Zulu Empire. So, instead of them going straight into a Zulu wedding situation, they go to what's called umgangelo, a muster of platoons, where the captains actually muster all the warriors beforehand. If there are any disputes to be settled, they're settled there on a hilltop, far away from the wedding itself. And once everything's been settled, the fights have been fought, the disputes settled, the captains then take the warriors down into the wedding situation where everyone is expected to behave themselves. And anyone who steps out of line in the wedding situation is liable for prosecution. However, up at the umgangelo, the muster of platoons, all is fair in love and war, as it were. And the women are there as well. And in fact, men often will settle a lover's dispute at an umgangelo. The bare-chested man is captain of his platoon, Indonesian Steve. Most of his men are young migrant workers just back on their Easter leave. If it weren't for their shields, one could well believe that they were urban blacks. But this platoon, coming in formation, exemplifies the fierce survival of Zulu martial arts in the face of other Western influences. The colourful man on the side of the platoon is the second in command. He leads in the singing. Women sometimes also arrive in formation. Shaka's biggest regiment, in fact, was Imvutwamini, those who ripen at noon. It was a women's regiment. The armbands, studs and leopard skin vests of these women are contemporary traditional dress. Traditionally, women were a psychic inspiration to their men at war. Today, women still herald in their men's platoons. They whistle, dance and ululate. And this brings out a mood of bravado in the men and cheers them on for what could lie ahead. There's an atmosphere of excitement and expectation. A nearby platoon throws out the taunts. captain shuffles his men into formation to accept the challenge. Bold with the red one. At the Singangelo, this muster of platoons, the men can challenge each other without disrupting the wedding itself. But the captains have to be tough to control the young hotheads, eager to prove their prowess. Individuals, platoons or platoon combinations will settle their differences in a fair fight. When, as now, there's no real enmity, the fighting will not be dangerous, but one gets a feel of what a serious clash could really be like. Many of these men will be back in the cities when Easter is over, most of them as migrant workers in the mines, 600 kilometers away. Here they will be working 3,000 feet below ground level, where the enemy becomes falling rock. The territorial platoon you saw in Zululand is fiercely loyal, even in the city. Young recruits are protected by their homeboy groups in a hostile city environment. Traditionally, a youth became a man when he joined the army. Today, however, he becomes a man when he's able to go into the urban economy and earn money to send back home to keep his family alive. To do this, he may have to spend 9 months, up to 18 months away on contract. And yet, perhaps out of nostalgia, he is often far more fiercely traditional than the man who never left home. And also, perhaps born of that nostalgia, the best songs and dances are composed in the city. And women, obviously, always feature foremost in the lyrics of these songs. Even in a song like this, there's a military nuance. The lyrics go like this. We saw them take up their weapons and head straight for us. Where were you then, O Captain? As the women dance, the men may gear or do their ritual war dance. The gear is a stylized dance fight against an imaginary foe to show one's resolution to do or die should the need arise. These women carry a defense stick, Paarl, and a striking stick, shihan, and wouldn't hesitate to use them. It's easy to understand the urgency these men feel when they're home for so short a time. It's been a long time since they've seen their women. And also unattached men have to get promises from the girls before they leave. Scores have to be settled between people if some kind of honor has been slighted. All these factors together gel to make a very, very poignant and explosive atmosphere. Once the men are back in the city, their wives and their affairs are well out of their control. But they'll talk about the fights, of victory and of running away. And they'll talk about the women who saw them and their acts of valor and the promises they got. The more sophisticated city men often call the migrants Onduguyami, which means, where's my stick? Because when the migrants are in trouble, they always reach for their sticks. But if there's no trouble, he'll dream of home. Perhaps dream of seeing his own girlfriend don the leopard skin and veil to become his bride. She'll dance with a knife, cutting off her past to join her future to his. And he and his territorial group will arrive from the city, and by pinning money on the girls' heads, the world at large will know that they're no longer boys, but powerful men. And that power gets its expression through his gear, the war dance, his stick and his shield. Just before sundown, the men will again play sticks, ukudlalindu, beyond the bounds of the wedding area. You see this youngster here, he's actually singing his own private little dirge which he sings before he goes into battle. It gets him kind of psyched up. They actually play, you can see it's very soft exchanges, but you still need a lot of skill for it. Someone's been injured, and they're just attending to his head quickly. The man in the suit is on the retreat. He's probably just come straight back from the city, possibly on the morning bus. People run in to separate them because they can see he can't stand up to the other fighter. Social restraints are very important in Zulu stick fighting. This is Sugumisa's younger brother, actually. A very formidable fighter. Here he's just standing, singing his song, daring anyone to come and challenge him. But there are no takers. Bad shot on the ankle. Must have just slipped through the man's defense as he tries to stop with the upwobble, or defense stick. But he smiles and gets up and goes for it again. The man below is trying to go on the outside and then swing inside. Notice the colourful pants. They shake hands. That means it was just a friendly little duel. The spectators are a very necessary part because it's they who ultimately judge the fight. Sugumisa and Tetu square up. This is probably one of the hardest ones we saw in Zululand because neither fighter would give an inch. And although they fight with different styles, they're both incredibly good. The shield has to move in your hand before you actually think about it. It's got to be an automatic reflex. Because it's Easter, this social occasion goes right into the night, and possibly into a new day tomorrow. It's over the Easter and Christmas weekends that all the men are back from the cities. Traditional dress merges very easily with contemporary Zulu dress, which is actually kind of tailor-made pants, which are very colourfully designed. It's a kind of folk art in a way. Here come the dancers now. They come in on a rather complicated little step, and you see they're wearing the leopard skin vests, which are very, very popular in Zululand at this time. And the ornate pants are called impondi. It comes from Afrikaans word bont. Someone dances out of step, they're considered to have let the rest of the dancers down. And it's the same as letting someone down when you're in a fight situation. Fighting lives on though, either in the sticks themselves or in the way the dancers symbolize the horns of a bull by raising their arms above their heads.